It's on. All right, thanks for the introduction, Ken. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about practical enrichment for growing pigs on commercial farms. Before I get started, Ken already mentioned it, but we do have a quality of life handbook that talks about a lot of enrichment ideas. So it's in the back table there, so please grab yourself a copy before you head home. So first of all, let's start with what is enrichment, right? So enrichment is the introduction of stimuli or modifications to the environment to better meet the species-specific behavioral and physiological needs for the species. And the important thing is here that these are things that are key to the species survival. And so for pigs, this means foraging behavior, such as rooting, exploring, chewing, nesting behavior for sows, and then thermoregulatory behavior, because as we all know, pigs cannot sweat, so they'll be wallowing to stay cool. So here you see like pictures at the bottom that wild boar are doing all these behaviors. Now, even though we've been selecting and breeding our pigs for centuries, the pigs that we have on the farms today, they still have these motivations. And the reason is that because they're important to the survival of the species, we cannot breed against them. So that means that we have to cater to them. So obviously most commercial barns, they have limited space and a relatively barren environment compared to the wild, right? So it means that there's a bit of an inability for these pigs on the farms today to perform these behaviors. And this can have negative impacts, both on welfare, on behavior, the physiology, and even on productivity. So for example, stressed pigs cannot handle diseases as well. So you may see higher medication use, higher mortality. They may be growing slower as well. On the other hand, you can see some damaging behavior. So for example, tail biting is one of the things that may be coming out of these natural behaviors not being met on the farms. But this is where enrichment can help. Now, another reason why we want to look at enrichments is there are some regulations around it. So the Canadian Pork Council Pig Care says that you need to have 2 or more enrichments provided to the pigs at all stages of production. And we also have the Code of Practice for the care and handling of pigs. And there the requirements are that pigs must be provided with multiple forms of enrichment that aim to improve the welfare of the animals through the enhancement of their physical and social environments. Now the thing is that neither of these has a lot of information about the characteristics that the enrichment need to provide to the pigs. When you compare it to European legislation, the Europeans are way further ahead where there's additional requirements on what those enrichments need to do for the pigs. As you all know, there's a new code of practice currently being developed, and while we don't really know what that's going to look like, there is a fair chance that there will be some stricter regulations around enrichments in that code of practice. So then what makes enrichments effective? So growing pigs, again, as mentioned, their motivation is to root and chew. So we want effective physical enrichments that triggers the behavioral feedback loops that satisfy this specific motivation. And some of the characteristics of good enrichments is that they're destructible, malleable, and deformable. So it can change shape, basically. They're chewable, so the surface can be broken and ingested. They're edible, they're rootable, they're odorous, because pigs love things that have a smell, and it needs to be novel, fresh, and it needs to stay clean from feces and urine. So some of the things that we can do to increase the attractiveness and effectiveness of enrichments that we give on the farm is we're looking at the size and structure of the enrichments. So we need to be thinking about the physiology of the pig. Can the pig grab with the mouth and teeth fully the object to manipulate it, right? So if you give a big 2x4 piece of wood to a piglet, that's not going to do much because they're not going to be able to grab that in their mouths, right? So adjusting the size of the enrichments to the size of the pig is important. The other thing is quantity. Like, is there enough to manipulate in a meaningful way? And so, for example, like you see a rope here at the bottom. If you just keep the rope as is, the 3 strands combined together, that's not going to be great for piglets. It's going to be good for grow-finished pigs, for example. But you can unwind those strands, and now you have 3 thinner ones. So now you can have 3 piglets play with 1 piece of rope instead of 1 pig. And because they're thinner, now it's better for piglets. So these are some of the things that we can think about when we give enrichments. Another important one is placement or location. So if it's suspended, the question is it low enough for pigs to grab with the mouth? And what we've noticed in the research straw that I'm going to be talking about here is that quite often on the farms, they were hanging it a little too high. And you have to think about like the physiology of the pig's neck. Pigs are meant to root and chew, so they're meant to look down. They may be looking forward. You hardly ever see a pig in nature looking up. And so if the enrichment is hanging a little too high, where the pig constantly needs to reach up to grab it, it's not going to be as desirable for them than when it's a little lower, where they can just like look down. So for example, here you see a toy. This is the Astro. This is hanging at a nice height. But when you look at this piece of cardboard, it's hanging pretty high for these piglets. So this is going to be not as good. And here you see a piece of wood. So instead of having the wood hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the pen, which is what we were doing for the research trial that I'm going to talk about after, here you see it hanging on 2 pieces of chain and lower. So now they can chew on it with the neck in a neutral position, but they can also root at it. So this is a more interesting way of providing wood than if you hang it in the middle of the pen. Now, I already mentioned cleanliness as well. And so this is a little bit of a question, like if you hang it too low, they're gonna poop on it, it's gonna get dirty, and then they're gonna lose interest in this enrichment very fast. So having it a little off the ground so it doesn't get dirty right away, but still low enough for them to be able to grab it is desirable. And then novelty. So pigs love new things, right? So there's different ways that you can provide novelty with enrichments. Either you can provide new objects into the pen. Now obviously this requires more labor, so it's a question like, do you have that labor available or not? You can use old objects and provide them in rotation. And I think in Europe they even have a system where it's hanging on chains on a thing that moves around, so the enrichment from pen 1 turns to pen 2, to pen 3, etc. Obviously not the cheapest option, but it's an option. You can also provide novelty by putting smells on the enrichment. And so one of the smells that you can put on is like phytocin. So does anyone in the room know phytocin? Has anyone used it? No? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, because it is known to reduce aggression. So some people will put it in their water. But in this case, you can just spray it on the enrichment, and that provides new smells, and that creates new interest. Okay, so now let's do a little bit of an exercise. Knowing what these desirable characteristics are for enrichments, let's talk about straw. What do you think, out of all of these characteristics that you see on the left side of the screen, which ones do you think straw has or doesn't have? Don't be shy. Anyone? I'm just going to go to a table and ask. Oh, there you go, Ada.
Chewable.
It's chewable. Perfect, thank you. It's edible? Thank you. Rootable. Yeah, exactly, it's rootable. Is there anything that it doesn't have? Okay, excellent. Yeah, so basically straw has pretty much all of the good characteristics, except that maybe it's not necessarily clean or fresh. What about the hanging rope? It's chewable, yeah, that's right. Anyone else?
Destructible.
Sorry?
Destructible too.
Destructible, yeah, definitely. They'll go through it in a couple days, so definitely destructible. Yeah. No, it's not rootable. So basically, a hanging rope has most of the characteristics except for rootable, right? Because it is hanging, so they cannot root it. Now, when we look at hanging toy, what do you think? Does it have any of these characteristics? Yeah, it's not really, well, not really edible. I would say it has a bunch of the characteristics to some extent, right? So it is destructible, but it will take a couple months, actually, for it to be fully destructible. It's definitely chewable, but the pieces don't really get broken off and ingested. So again, it's like, yeah, it's kind of there, but not really. It's definitely not edible, it's not rootable, it's not novel. There might be a little bit of smell to it because it is a natural rubber in this case, but I don't know, I'm not sure. And it stays clean and fresh for a while, but because it is in the farm for a longer period of time, eventually it does get dirty. Okay, now hanging chains. Do hanging chains have any of these characteristics?
No, but they're very effective.
Well, we'll talk about that. So basically, chains don't really have any of these characteristics except for that it stays fresh, right, or clean. Generally, chains are pretty clean. Okay, so I can hear you thinking, and you basically said it out loud. Pigs chew on chains, so that means it must be working, right? Well, unfortunately, no. So interaction with enrichment does in itself not mean there is improved welfare. Okay, so because we have to remember that it needs to trigger behavioral feedback loop that satisfies the motivations. So I want to think, I want to make you think about it in a different way. So imagine you're a little hungry. I know it's hard to imagine because we just had lunch, but imagine you're a little hungry and you have a craving for something sweet. Okay, so you're going to the back table there and you find a cookie. It's pretty good, right? Like if you're having a craving for something sweet, well, you're probably going to eat the cookie and you're going to feel satisfied. It's going to satisfy your craving for something sweet. Now, let's say you find a chocolate muffin. Jackpot, right? Like, I know for myself, if I find a chocolate muffin, I have a craving for something sweet, I'm going to be very happy. But now, imagine that all you find is a dry, salty cracker. Is that going to satisfy your craving for something sweet?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? So if someone tells you, like, hey, I hear that on the other side of the room there are cookies, are you going to go and try to find the cookies, even though you just ate the crackers because you were hungry and you thought there was nothing else? Well, probably, because you still have the craving for something sweet. And so basically chains are like the salty cracker. If you only provide chains, they will chew on it. But it doesn't provide that positive feedback, right? So now once they're done chewing on the chain, they'll move on and find something else to chew on because they still have that need to chew. But if you provide straw, which is kind of like the muffin here, right? Like they will chew on the straw, they feel satisfied, so they will not go and look for something else to chew on afterwards. And this is where tail biting issues are like one of the things. You might still be seeing tail biting issues if you provide chains because they're still looking for something else to chew on. Okay, so then the question is like, how do we check effectiveness of enrichment? If just the use of enrichment in itself is not enough to tell if it's working or not, how can we tell? Well, we can look at physiological and behavioral things that are actually measurable. So for example, we can look at if there is reduced stress, right? So we can take a blood sample and then we can look at cortisol levels. We can also look at, do they have better immunity? So we can look again at like inflammation biomarkers, but also at simpler things like medication use or mortality. Then when it comes to behavior, we can look at social dynamics. So are the groups calm or not? We can look at the promotion of the species relevant behaviors, such as rooting. And we can look at reduction of abnormal or damaging behaviors such as tail biting. All right, so with that in mind, we did a research trial where we went to a couple of commercial barns, and I'll only talk about one today, and a research farm at Prairie Swine Centre. And we had the aim to find practical enrichments for growing pigs from breeding to slaughter in commercial farms that provide benefits for both welfare and production parameters. And when I say practical, I meant we wanted to look at things that are relatively affordable and not highly labor intensive. So we took different measures. We looked at pig performance, carcass traits, the ease of handling of the pigs, level of aggression, damaging behavior, other behaviors, and economic analysis. Now, the economic analysis, we haven't done that yet, so unfortunately, I won't be talking about that today. So first, when we look at the setup in the commercial farm, we had 3 different groups. So we had a control group. So these pigs, they had 24 to 28 pigs per pen in the nursery. In the grower and finisher, we had pens that either had 24 pigs, so we called those single pens, or we had double pens, which was literally 2 pens with just a piece of the wall removed. So they had 48 pigs per pen. And we gave the control group only 1 chain per 24 pigs. Then in the static group, and with static I mean we hung it up and we kept it there the entire time. Those were different kinds of toys. So in the nursery we had the yellow Luna, so that's the spiky ball. I think the commercial barn staff, they called it the COVID ball. So that we gave that in the nursery, again 1 per pen. Then in the grow finish we went to the blue Luna, and the only difference is the size. So again, they're a little bigger now, the pigs, so the size of the enrichment needs to be a little bigger. And then we also gave the porky play. And then in the finisher, we also added the Astro, so they had either 1 Astro or they had 1 blue Luna and a porky play. Now in the renewable group, we tried to find things that the farm already had available. And so this was, in this case, it was cardboard rolls and cardboard edge protectors. So the rolls basically came from the plastic wrap, it's surrounded by, or the middle of the wrap is a cardboard roll. So that roll, we just cut it up in pieces and we hung that in the nursery. And then the cardboard edge protectors, that's what comes on the side of boxes so that it doesn't get crushed during shipping. So they already had these things coming into the farm, so they used that, so that's for the grower. And then in the double pens, we also provided rope. And in the finisher, we switched the cardboard to a 2x4 piece of wood and rope again. And to create that novelty for the static group, once a week we sprayed phytocin on the toys. And whereas for the renewable group, the cardboard and the rope were replaced once a week, and the wood planks stayed in the finisher for the entire period. So here's a little video. It's a little loud. So yeah, you see they're playing with the piece of cardboard, and this is the chain. And there is the Luna. And then here is a little picture or video of the grow finish. So you see the rope there. And then a piece of plank. Look at how high that plank is hanging. That's going to be really hard for those pigs to chew. And whereas the Lunas, they're hanging at a nice height.
People gotta castrate.
Sorry?
Castrating their pigs.
Yeah, this farm does not castrate their pigs. I can neither confirm nor deny. Okay, so the Prairie Swine Centre setup was very similar. So the control group, again, only chains. The static group, we use porky play in the nursery, and then the blue Luna in grow finish. And for the renewable, we just use rope in the nursery and just wood in the grow finish. We only had 10 pigs a pen in the nursery and 9 pigs per pen in grow finish, because this is a research barn, so we usually go with smaller groups. And again, we sprayed phytocin on the toys, and we replaced the rope once a week, and the plank stayed there the whole time. All right, so moving on to some results. So we looked at body weight at nursery exit. There was no effect there on of enrichment use. But when we look at pig removal, and with pig removal, I mean pigs that were either found dead in the pen, that were euthanized, or that were moved to the sick pen. Although there was no significant difference, like in the nursery there was nothing, but in the grow finish, and it was actually mostly the grower period, we noticed that there were more pigs removed in the change group than the other two groups. Okay, and I want you to remember this because this is going to be important later on with some other results that we're having. So then when we're looking at medication use, both in the nursery and the grow finish, we noticed that both the number of pigs that were treated with medication and the medication use, which was pigs treated multiplied by the number of treatments that they needed, which was usually between 1 to 3 days, was the best for the toys group. So they needed the least number of pigs and the least medication use was in the toys group. And although the chains in the renewable group were, the chains in the renewable group were not significantly different. So now you can wonder, like, well, the renewable group had this rope and cardboard, like, why are we not seeing a change now in the medication use and the toys we do? And one of the reasons is that, what we think one of the reasons is that the cardboard disappeared within a few days. And it took them maybe about 4 days to chew through the rope, but we only replaced it once a week. So that meant that like the rest of the week, they only had a chain, right? And so maybe if we replaced it twice a week, we would have seen better results for this renewable group. But yeah, like that's why we think that in this case, the toys worked the best. Okay, so then when we look at the carcass traits, so first, it took about 158 days to reach a slaughter weight of roughly 145 kilos, carcass weight of about 116. But yeah, we looked at, if you just looked at the carcass traits, you would say, well, the change group did the best because they have the highest weight. And this is where I want to remind you that we have more pigs removed in the grower phase in this change group. And that's why we ended up with a lower number of carcasses on the change group. But also, we just know that if we have less pigs in the pen, there's there's more feeder space per pig, there's more space in general per pig, so they tend to grow better. So we think that the reason why they had a higher carcass weight and live weight is not because chains do more for the welfare of the pigs, it's because they had less pigs in the pen. So when you look at the total amount of carcass weight, so that is the number of carcasses multiplied by the live weight, when you compare that for the groups, you'll see that there was about 60,000 kilos of carcass weight for the chains and the renewable group, but there was 2,000 extra kilos in the toys group. And this is what you're getting paid on. So this is important to remember. Okay, now when we go to ease of handling, we looked at the time it took to move pigs from the nursery to the grower room, and then again from the grower to the finisher room. We had no effect there, and we also had no effect of improfessed injection time. We also did not see any effect on aggression or tail biting. So skin lesion scores and tail lesion scores, no difference between the enrichment groups. Now, interesting to note though, that for the tail lesion scores, even though there were no tail biting outbreaks at this farm during the trial, about 3/4 of the pigs did have some tail lesions. So it means that there is some tail biting happening. It's just not an outbreak to the point where you need to do something about it, but it does show that there is some tail biting happening. Then when we look at other behavior, so the enrichment use, we saw that the renewable group had the highest use of the enrichment, and they also had the lowest amount of pen-mate manipulation. So this is like for 1 minute, we looked what the pigs were doing in the pen. So the least number of pigs were playing with other pigs' tails or ears, and yeah, that lines up with the, some other stuff later on. So body weight, oh sorry, like now we're moving on to the Prairie Swine Centre results. So again, pig performance, we saw no effect on body weight or average daily gain. But again, with pig removal, again, not statistically significantly different, but numerically, there is more pigs removed on the change group than the other two groups. Then again, with medication use, somewhat similar to the previous trial, when we look at the number of pigs medically treated, there's no effect there, but the medication use was significantly higher for the pigs on chains versus the pigs on the other two groups. So this is somewhat similar to the commercial barn, but in the commercial barn, the toys group was the best, whereas here we see that the toys and the renewable group are very similar to each other. And we're thinking it's probably because there were less pigs per pen, so it took them longer to get through this renewable enrichment. So the enrichments were available for a longer period of time. So then when we look at the carcass traits, took about 117 days to get to a live weight of 128 kilos. We saw absolutely no difference on any of this, of the enrichment use. So then ease of handling, again, no effect on moving time to move them from the nursery to grow finish. We also looked at a handleability score, so we gave them a score of 1, so this was every time we weighed them. A score of 1 means they had no issues getting into the scale. Score 2 is they hesitate before entering the scale. And a score 3 is like they're trying to escape or refusing to enter. So a lower score means better. And you'll see that the highest score is for renewable. So the renewable group in grower and finisher were not as easy to handle. So you I can see people thinking, huh, what? Yeah. I think the reason for this is like we have to remember that in the nursery they had this highly desirable rope, right? And then we switched them to grow finish where we gave them a piece of 2x4, and as it turns out, it doesn't seem to be as effective as rope. And so we think that like, and this is also like scientifically proven, when you give very good enrichment to pigs and then you take it away, sometimes it actually leads to more problems. So it leads to some frustration. So we think that these pigs might have been a little bit frustrated, and because of it, they may have been a little harder to handle. So when we look at aggression, no effect in nursery and grower. But again, in the finisher phase, when we look at the skin lesions, the renewable group did a little bit worse than the other two groups. So again, we think it's because they were a little bit frustrated going from this very nice rope to this wood that they're like, well, what am I going to do with that? Then when we look at tail and ear biting, tail lesion scores in the nursery, again, this is where they had that lovely rope. The renewable group did the best, so they had the highest amount of pigs that had no lesions at all. The chains did the worst. Then when we look at grower, it kind of flips around. So again, like they're going from the rope to the wood, so now the renewable group is the group doing the worst, and the toys group is doing the best. But also, like the chains group is the group that has the highest amount of big lesions, so lesion score of higher than 2. So it means that they seem to continue chewing more so that it ends up with bigger lesions than the renewable group. And then when we look at ear lesions, those were the worst for the chains group as well. Oh, there we go. When we look at the use of the enrichment, it was in the nursery we did not see an effect. But in the grower, we saw most use on the toys and the least use with the chains. And when we look at pen mate and ear and tail manipulation count, in the nursery, we saw the best in the renewable and the worst in the chains, which lines up nicely with the nursery tail bite results that we saw earlier. So in conclusion, the pigs with the chains, they had the highest removal rate and the highest medication use in both trials. The static, like the toys, seem to be working slightly better than the renewable enrichments, for performance and welfare, at least in the commercial trial. And we think it's because the rope and the cardboard disappeared within a few days. And then the rest of the time they only had a chain left. Whereas the toys, they were staying there the entire time. It's possible also that the phytocin may have had some effect. We don't know. We sprayed it once a week. So we don't know if it was mostly the toy or the phytocin or the combination. And then, as I mentioned before, like there's a potential for frustration in pigs if they are exposed to very effective and attractive enrichment first, and then that gets taken away. Now, some other things that we've learned, and this is kind of like the million-dollar question. How many pieces of enrichment do you need per pen, or, you know? And the thing is, like, scientifically, we don't really have a good answer for this. But if you look at the results from these two trials, like in the commercial farm, we had 1 piece of enrichment for every 24 pigs, and in prairie swine, we had 1 for every 9. And in both trials, we saw an improvement in the medication use and how many pigs were removed. But in the commercial farm, we did not see any effects on lesion scores, tail binding scores, things like that. And in the Prairie Swine Centre farm, we did. So while I don't have a perfect answer for you, I do think if you want to use enrichment to reduce tail biting and improve the welfare of these animals, which really is what we want to do, then probably 1 in 24 is not quite enough. So it might be closer to that 1 in 9, maybe it'll be 1 in 15, not quite sure, but it's something to keep in mind. And so yeah, just going back to that cookie example, you would be pretty frustrated if you only get a few crumbs instead of the whole cookie, right? So we also did this trial at the Star City colony, and unfortunately I didn't have time today to discuss those results, but I will be writing a Centered on Swine article about it, so the economic analysis is going to be in there, and hopefully some results on the Star City colony trial as well, so keep an eye out for that. So with that, I would like to thank the commercial barn partners and the staff that provided all the enrichments for us and took a bunch of the parameters that we were looking at today. I would like to thank Jen Yun, Yolande, Martina, Abby, and Carmen. They were all involved in this project in different ways. The Prairie Swine Centre barn staff, and of course I would like to acknowledge the financial support of the ADOPT grant and funding partners. And with that, I would love to answer some questions.